that procurement pressure is kind of sheltering the farm gate price.
We actually saw the sale yards kick into gear.
Gosh, there were some real good bargains to be had, not the vendors probably want to hear that.
And you're losing 10, 20 cents a kg instantly if you're going through the yards anyway.
Hello and welcome to AgriHQ&A, where you get to stop by and have a bit of a chat with the AgriHQ analysts. I'm Nicola. We're going to be joined shortly by Suz Bremner and Reece, who are in our Global HQ fielding office. We're going to have a bit of a chat about the store cattle market. Now, a few people have been tapping me on the shoulder and asking me what store cattle are worth at the moment, and I'm having to break a few hearts. So don't be like those guys. Subscribe to our reports and keep on top of the game, and then you'll always be in the know. So you can head over to agrihq.co.nz and get yourself sorted out.
What do you know about store cattle?
There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, it has been good. Like, we've had a bit of rain over the last 24 hours, which has been fantastic. But it's not going to go very far, I think, to helping these store markets. We've seen some pretty tough times in these sale yards and that.
Yeah. The South Island in particular is a little bit of a concern, but I guess, Reece, you're seeing some South Island cattle head up to the North Island?
Yeah, heaps of South Island cattle coming up into fielding lately. Been hit or miss for them whether it's been worth it, but I guess when the buy shards just aren't there in the South Island, like at least they're getting them moved.
That's the thing, they may not actually even be able to get them off the property if they actually leave them down there. I remember talking to Morris Stewart, who's obviously the auctioneer at fielding here for PGG Wrightson. Would have been a month and a half ago, just as the spring cattle sales started, and I actually wrote across the rails on it how the numbers were so high then, and he said, well, we're not going to see big numbers, carry on. It wasn't that he was wrong, not at all, it was just that we started to see those cattle come from different areas, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean last week at fielding, like there was heaps of bulls from Talbot, heaps of yearling steers and 2-year-old steers from Taranaki, then we had 300 cattle from the South Island, so fielding's almost become this central point of pretty much cattle sales for the upper South Island and the lower North Island.
Yeah, which is really interesting because, I mean, obviously you've got a pretty hefty transport cost with getting cattle across the strait, but unfortunately for the South Islanders, that seems to be what they need to do to find that market, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think you're looking at, like, if the difference between the North Island and the South Island is at least 20 cents, it's kind of worth the freight.
Yeah.
And I think in some cases we're seeing 45 cents difference between the North Island and South Island. And then
sorry, Nat.
Oh, yeah. So down here, we were doing all right for the R2 cattle, but like the last couple of weeks, it's just buyers are full on those R2 cattle, and just the amount that have been quitting South Canterbury, North Otago already. Everyone has got what they need, and there's a little issue with kill space as well, so we have to be able to kill them to buy more in.
Yeah, so we've seen down in the South Island, we've seen those 2-year-old steers, the dairy beef sort of sitting around $2.30, which we haven't seen those levels for quite some time. And I think the fact that there is, there's so much supply of the dairy beef out there, and just that demand, it's a pretty simple equation. That demand is just not there for them.
Yeah, and it feels like a lot of buyers are getting quite picky about what dairy beef stuff they take these days. Maybe because there is something around they can afford to, but like a nice clean mark here for Frisian is doing okay. But the moment they start looking a bit funny, it just drops.
You get a few horns in the pens or even if they're not necessarily homebred and been collected up from a few different places, there's still that Bovis cloud hanging over, isn't there? So. The store cattle markets at the moment are really, this is their time to shine, and we haven't seen that grass market kick in, which usually underpins for those type of cattle, doesn't it? We just haven't seen it.
Oh, well, I guess in optimistic terms as well, we've got South Island cattle, selling in the North Island again. Like last season, there were some patches through last season where that was just not possible. People, was burning those, particularly the Frisian bulls, with Bovis. People just didn't want to take the risk. even though in-bovs numbers are creeping up again, we're still only, I think, at 4 farms. So as people are willing to buy the South Island stock, which is good. And it means that South Islanders don't slaughter them earlier, and we get good production out of those animals.
I mean, all the factors are there to explain why that is. You know, we have got that extra supply. We've got a larger percentage of lesser bred cattle coming forward. We haven't had the rain. Most regions have not had the rain. Phil Duncan's Weather Watch year-to-date figures show that most areas have had about 60 to 70% of the annual rainfall, and we're getting pretty close to the end of the year. And we have to remember that some of those figures show that are from weather events like the flooding in Northland and things like that. So it's not like it's been spread consistently throughout the year. You can understand why people are sort of sitting back.
Yeah, the only region probably be Southland, where instead of wishing for rain, they're wishing for sunshine. Yeah.
It definitely feels like confidence is coming into it a lot as well. Like you're seeing it at the moment, or we've seen it for quite a while with those sort of 4 2-year-old steers. They've been doing quite well for ages, and they've been pretty much steady for 2-3 months now. But almost seeing it with the yearlings now, where the very top end of the yearlings are doing all right, because people are going, all right, we can get rid of those relatively quickly. It's a safe-ish bet. You might not make a huge amount of money, but you're not going to lose a lot either. But once you start getting longer-term cattle, people don't know what the long-term outlook is, and they're just a bit rattled about everything that's happened in the last 12 months. And as well, I think we've got to remember the fact that store cattle markets were so strong sort of spring last year, and then the big drop in schedules happened before the drought. A lot of people lost a lot of money on cattle before drought, before lockdown, and that's, I think a lot of people that did that last year, bought up last year, but just gun shy about it all and going, you know what, we can't have that happen again. Yeah.
The other thing we have seen is that obviously like through the drought and that, a lot of supplementary feed was used up. There has been talk of people, you know, they need to fill up their supplementary feed stock again before they would even look at buying cattle. It's only now that you start to see paddocks cut around the place and baled up. So obviously prior to that, they haven't been in these store cattle markets. They might start trickling in now. And, you know, the supply is still definitely there, but that has been another area that has sort of taken people out of that store cattle market.
Yeah, got a feel for those, you know, South Canterbury farmers that possibly sent feed up to the Hawke's Bay during the drought. Now having to look around and see what's available, what help is available to them.
Certainly Wairarapa, you know, they're heading down that path as well, and they were a massive support for Hawke's Bay. But unfortunately Hawke's Bay is not in the position to you know, return that at the moment. And I think it's going to be interesting to see that, what the weather outlooks, how they help us. Hope they help us.
It doesn't look that fantastic for the east coast of the South Island, which is where I am. But you know, if we were to get some sunny, warm weather for Southland, that might turn things around, because when we had that huge weather come in, that definitely depressed the store cattle market for a minute or two. We had the heifers going back down to lockdown prices for that particular week, and then, you know, as it all came to pass, it sort of stabilised.
Yeah, it's certainly. I think they are still talking La Nina for us, aren't they? But again, from information from Richard Rennie, a reporter for Farmers Weekly, through Phil Duncan's Weather Watch, is that, you know, we probably need double our monthly rainfall to even come close, and the chances of getting that are pretty slim.
And then you might just end up with more rain during the summer, which possibly isn't much of a help in terms of, you know, facial eczema and things like that.
Does it feel like the South Island, because like South Island prices have come back quite a bit the last 2-3 weeks, especially since that weather bomb, does it feel like that's sort of almost come back a bit too far and that people are just scared away from it and it'll even out, or is there too many big factors that are holding it back?
I think almost getting to the prices where there were a few people that pulled out of the store cattle market last season and the season before, when the calf prices got so crazy. I think that we are seeing some more reasonable prices, better margins for those guys. So in the Livestock Insight report last week, we ran a few numbers, and it looked like the margins for steers, for short-term trading steers, were going to be better than last season if you've got the feed for them. So I think there's some market signals there in terms of being able to buy better quality stock at better prices for people that have been burnt by that in the past. But if you have some heifers to sell, like I do, it's a little bit of a concern where on earth they're going to go, because sometimes you're seeing purebred beef, station bred heifers selling for $400, yearlings. So it's, how do you make ends meet?
It is such an interesting one, because we sold heifers, yearling heifers last week, and we were very fortunate that our agent did his homework, and he found someone who wanted them for breeding, and they made $780. So it's, there are wins out there, but there's also a lot of things going, unfortunately, the other way. What's going to be interesting is with all the feeder calf sales being fairly poor and a lot of rearers not rearing as many, what's going to happen in 2 years' time?
Yeah, we were even talking about this last season, where it felt like the calf rearers were going to quit the game and that we'd be dealing with a shortage now. And it hasn't come to pass, and I wonder if there's a lot of sentiment there for the dairy farmers who don't like to put good stock on the bobby truck. So I wonder if they filled the gap there a little bit. But I would say that we do still probably have a shortage of good quality stock. We seem to have a lot of stock in front of us, but we're seeing a lot of lighter yearlings and a lot of lighter R2s. And
that's kind of sort of that Kiwi cross.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff floating around.
So much more of that, there's no market for them.
Yep.
I think, and generally, yes, live weights are back this year across, and that's right across the board from your annual drafts right through, and I mean, that is through no fault of anybody's, that has just been this season. But I think we're also seeing a lot more, a lot of these cattle that we're seeing come into the yards cannot be sold in the paddock because there's no market for them now.
Yeah, exactly. Like you just got to put them in front of people and see what they're worth. But that's the thing, people don't know what they're worth because there's such a, there's just such an uneven set of cattle out there at the moment. Yeah. It's not, you can't just put a per kilo price on it and call it that because it's not how it's operating. Animal
health issues have obviously, there's been a few issues with that too, going through that dry spell and into winter as well. So that's knocked around weights and the quality of what people are putting forward. So I think a lot of people will just be really happy to get 2020 behind them for all sorts of reasons. And I guess we just have to, move on from there. Surely next year, no, I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to jinx it.
I guess that we're, digging around for something optimistic to say is that if you are in a position to buy, there are some bargains out there. I mean,
it is a buyer's market.
Yeah, I was at the sale the other day, and if I had just purchased a property and was wondering what I was going to do with it, I had my pick of some nice breeding heifers. So it's a good way to start out. And maybe there are people looking to do that as we end up with less dairy support and things like that. Like people will be looking to change how they do things with the regulations.
Yeah, and the quality cattle will always be chased as well. There's always a market, particularly through obviously Manawatu and Hawke's Bay for those short-term traditional steers. There's always a market for them. But obviously they watch their margins and adjust their prices accordingly. But farmers of those sort of cattle are always rewarded for them. We didn't really touch on yearling Frisian bulls, but
that's a bit depressing.
It's not a bit of a game.
Oh, is it bad for the North Island? Where are we looking at?
It's just hard to shift. There's heaps of them out there. Heaps on quote and things, and ones you see coming through the yards are usually ones that can't be moved in the paddock.
Yeah, they got slapped down at fielding, but it's so hard to tell because fielding isn't really a benchmark for the bulls. Fielding can be crap and the paddock market stays alright sometimes.
That's what I wrote across the rails last week. Pretty much exactly it, is that the pad that what you see at auction for particularly for Frisian bull, yearling Frisian bulls, is generally not what is happening in the paddock, because the paddock ones are better, cleaner lines. And so on.
I look at the livestock insight indicators, and we're sort of like $2.80, or $2.65 for the South Island, $2.85 for the North Island. But then you go look at the sales, and sometimes they're selling for less than $2.
Well, yearling Frisian bulls are making the same as 2-year-old bulls, essentially, aren't they? Per kilo.
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much
They've been like that for quite a while now. Actually,
it's quite interesting, that one.
There's a little market there for like the very specific weight range. I think it's like 220 to 270 or something, and that's a little hot market for the South Island, because those are small enough to truck up to the North Island, maximise the trucking. So
basically, anyone who's picking up cattle, Frisian bulls at that weight, that is a carryover cattle base. So there's can be a little bit of hesitancy on them, because they don't know what the season is going to be, and some will target slightly heavier weights that they know they can finish earlier. But yeah, it's all dependent on what people are looking for.
Well, there's been a lot going through fielding at that sort of like low to mid 200 kg weight, but they're almost buying them at per head prices. It's like $650 to $700. Like it's pretty much always within that. So it's like per kilo it can be up to above $3 kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then once you start sneaking above it, start hitting 300 kgs, it just goes all per kilo.
If we look at it relative to the slaughter value, those yearling Frisian bulls, they're not too far off where they need to be, considering the difference in slaughter prices from this year and last year. There might be sort of 5 to 10 cents in it, so it's not too bad.
It's not, but a lot of people look at the Frisian bull market as the one that gets them out of the hole, and so it needs to be a good margin. There will probably be a lot more people now going, okay, well, let's put some Frisian bulls on, flip them through the system quickly, just to get that that extra money flowing again after a pretty tough year. So there needs to be a good margin.
Is that
they're a bit more consistent. You can sort of calculate figures on it a lot easier. We're just going through this at home, so it's all pretty fresh. Their turnover, like if you buy obviously the older bulls, their turnover is quicker. But there's just a little bit more consistency in that market than if you're buying even lambs or something else. So
plus if you have the feed, the growth rates that those bulls can do
are pretty phenomenal. Yeah.